Bienvenidos! Today we're going to talk about affirmative to commands in Spanish. In Spanish, the affirmative to commands are formed differently from negative commands. That is, if you're talking with somebody familiar to you and you're giving them a command to do something, you're going to use a different verb form than if you were giving them a command not to do something. And in this video, we're talking about affirmative commands, where you're telling someone to do something, and the to form would be the familiar form. So you're talking with somebody familiar to you or somebody younger than you. In Spanish, commands are called mandatos. Mandatos. And so these are the affirmative to commands or the affirmative informal commands. And in Spanish, when we want to form a verb to give an informal affirmative command, all that we need to do is use the usted present indicative form. Just use the usted form. Use the usted verb form. So if I wanted to say to my little sister, talk on this cell phone, all I would need to do is use the usted form of hablar, habla, to tell her to talk on the phone. Habla por el celular. Now remember, these are the affirmative forms. So if I wanted to tell her not to talk on the cell phone, these are not the forms I would use. These are affirmative to commands. If I wanted to tell somebody I'm familiar with to write a message, escribe un mensaje. And in Spanish, we could also use the pronoun tú after the verb. In English, we don't do that, but in Spanish, it's grammatically correct. When you're giving a command, it's okay to use the pronoun, the subject pronoun, after the verb. Habla tú por el celular. So we could put that pronoun in there. It's optional, but it would be grammatically correct if we did. And if we did put the pronoun in, we're being a little more emphatic with our command, a little more demanding. So it's adding a little bit more formality to that command. Habla tú por el celular. Escribe tú un mensaje. Okay, a little more emphasis on the command. Pide la cuenta. Ask for the bill. Ponlo en la mesa. Put it on the table. Now notice that the direct object pronoun, lo, comes right after the verb. It's attached to the verb. So when we're giving affirmative to commands, and we have direct object or indirect object pronouns, we're going to put them on the verb. Look at the next example. Escríbelo. Write it. Escríbelo. So we have our pronoun attached onto the end of the verb. And notice that we needed to add an accent mark in escribir to maintain the same pronunciation of the verb. So when you add the pronoun on, if it changes the pronunciation of the word according to the rules, then what you have to do is add an accent mark to the verb, because the accent, the emphasis remains on the verb. We don't change the way we pronounce the verb. So if we add on a pronoun on the end, we have to sometimes add an accent mark depending on how the pronunciation would change. In this case, we didn't have to add an accent mark because it wouldn't change the way the word is pronounced. This would have changed the way the word was pronounced, so we needed to add the accent mark to preserve the pronunciation on escribe. Ven aquí. Come here. Ven aquí. Dime la verdad. Tell me the truth. Here's your verb be, and this is the pronoun. Tell it to me. Now, a couple of these verbs are irregulars. Pon. Actually, three of them. Pon, di, and ven. These three verbs are part of a group of verbs that are irregular in the two affirmative command forms. Poner is pon. Tener, ten. Venir, ven. Hacer, haz. Salir, sal. Decir, di. Ser, sé. Ir, ve. And pay attention to ser, because what does this look like? This looks like another verb that we know, saber. It looks like the yo form of saber. But in the command form of ser, it's spelled the same way. So you have to use context to decide which verb is being used. Is it the yo form of saber, or is it the command form of ser?